Remember, the economy is growing all of this time. The economy continues to grow. Look, here is gross domestic product growth from 1929 to 2011. The economy overall has done extremely well, and productivity keeps on increasing. We are producing more and more and more and more and more value. That's a big, big success story. But here is the problem. Here's the puzzle. Because if you look at the average hourly earnings of production workers, the average hourly earning continued to rise until the late 1970s, and then something happened. Flattening wages. Look at the gap. Something happened in the late 1970s. Something happened in the late 1970s, folks. Remember, starting in the late 70s, the typical wage is flat. But a lot of people are buying. How did they do that? How does the middle class manage to keep on spending when wages are flat? The first coping mechanism, starting in the late 70s, is women go into paid work.
Tumble out of bed and I stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition and yawn and stretch and try to come to life.
Young mothers went into work in huge numbers. We haven't seen anything like it, a social revolution.
Traffic starts jumping with folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5, what a way to make
9 to 5. Dolly Parton, 1980. Dolly Parton, you know, she is only 5 feet tall. They didn't go to work because there were all these wonderful professional opportunities open to women. Some of them did, but that's not the major reason women went to work. They went to work mainly because they had to prop up family incomes that were dropping because the men in the family, their wages were going nowhere. But there's only a limit to how many young mothers can go into work. And so the second strategy used by the 1990s was that families, both men and women, worked longer hours.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by.
When I was Secretary of Labor, I remember looking at the data, and I was amazed. And then I'd go out into the field, and I'd go into various cities, and I'd talk with people, and people were working, you know, all hours. I mean, second jobs, third jobs, overtime. If they were professionals, billable hours coming out of their ears. We were working 300 hours a year more than the typical European. I mean, we were working harder than the industrious, enormously industrious Japanese. But there's a limit to how hard you can work. When those were exhausted, the third coping mechanism was borrowing, going into debt, which seemed easy because housing prices were going up. From the mid to late 90s onward, you have this huge rise in housing prices. People said, well, I can take out a loan against my home. I could use my home as collateral, or I can refinance my home. And that kept the middle class going. Homes were like piggy banks. We had a debt bubble prompted by middle class America trying to maintain its living standard in the face of stagnant wages.
We're seeing more clients every day that very sadly they've gotten into a debt hole that is very difficult to dig out of.
But there's a limit to how far you can do that. You know, that was a speculative bubble, and it burst in 2008. We know what happened. And so all of the coping mechanisms that the middle class has used to avoid the inevitable reality that their wages have gone nowhere for 30 years, adjusted for inflation, are now exhausted. When the middle class doesn't share in the economic gains, you get into this downward vicious cycle.